Hey there, everyone. My name is Gregory Skinner. I'm VP here at Escalent in the auto and mobility practice, and I'm excited to present a cool panel to you today. It's called Reciprocity in Action, How Collaboration Drives Innovation. And I've got excellent panel members here with me to dig into the topic. Let me just do quick introductions. First, you'll see Caleb Pontius. He is for Rockport Commercial Vehicles. We have Tony Lista from Unicell, Greg Zilberfarb from the Propane Education and Research Council, and Jessie Denver from the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. I'm going to give each of our panelists just a quick minute to introduce themselves a little bit further, and then we're going to dive right in. Jessie, do you want to go first?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Gregory. Jessie Denver. I'm lead advisor with the State of California Governor's Office, and specifically the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. And I'm in the zero-emission vehicle office, and that's where I serve as lead advisor and really focus on the intersection between transitioning commercial medium and heavy duty trucks to zero emission trucks, and that intersection between working with industry and our utilities and other state agency regulators to ensure that transition engages all stakeholders, that we're really hearing your industry's concerns and barriers, and that we work behind the scenes to connect the dots to get those barriers out of the way. So I really focus on the utility piece, making sure you can get power to the site that you need, collaborating with my other state agency colleagues that are regulating the industry, and then working with industry stakeholders like yourselves to really evaluate what are the innovative solutions that you might need to make this transition a reality.
Thanks, Jessie. As soon as you said getting power to the site, everybody in the audience went like, hey, wait, what? Tony, how do you like to go next?
Thanks, Gregory. Tony Lista with Unicell Body Company, Vice President, General Manager of our van body division. We are a one-piece van body manufacturer. We're also a full upfitting solution for dealers and fleets, offering a multitude of upfit solutions, stake bodies, dump bodies, everything that dealers and customers need to go to business.
Perfect. Thank you, Tony. Caleb, how are you?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Gregory. Yeah, I'm Caleb Pontius with Rockport Commercial Vehicles. We are a division of Forest River Inc., which is has different divisions, including RV, bus, and marine. And then we're the commercial space. But yeah, we're a van body manufacturer, building different varieties of both delivery but service vehicles, and focus on different markets. But primarily have been in the industry for about 20 years, both in sales and leadership activity. I'm currently the general manager at Rockport Commercial Vehicles.
Right on. Thank you so much. Last but not least, we have Greg.
Thanks, Gregory. So I'm with the Propane Education and Research Council, and we're a checkoff program. So we get half a penny for every gallon of odorized propane sold in the United States. It doesn't sound like a whole lot of money, but it ends up being about $35 to $45 million a year, depending on the weather. And we take that money, we obviously do education and research, but we also partner with other people to bring new efficient products to market. And today I'm going to talk about propane autogas, so propane for vehicles.
Perfect. Okay, I won't say that we have the perfect or greatest panel in this summit, but we've got a pretty excellent one. As soon as you see the word innovation, then of course we're talking about new, exciting, different things. You know, we're really in an industry that that takes some time to change. And now we're in this state of rampant change. So let's talk a little bit about, because this is focused on this notion of collaboration and working together, why don't we just sort of level set, and each of you, if you could maybe throw out your definition of collaboration in this context, like in this specific context.
So I can start off, but yeah, just in our space, we're continuously looking to improve our products, just like our competitors are. And so One interesting thing with collaboration in our space, and Tony's also a member of this as well, is we have a van body committee essentially that meets at NTEA and has some other communications throughout the year. But recently we've been working on a project to, and actually they've completed, I believe, a project where we are essentially notating items that would be important. So as all these new electric vehicles and all alternative fuel propulsion vehicles come out, that the OEMs that are designing these vehicles are taking certain things into consideration in their design process. So it's all fine and good if they design this really exciting new product, but if it's very hard to integrate into our space as putting bodies on these vehicles, we've probably fallen short both on the OEM side and on the body side. So collectively, we're taking all these ideas from the body companies and putting them on paper for OEMs, so that as they design new vehicle platforms, it's got some key things to know about, as they're designing the product. So hopefully they don't get this thing out to the market and it doesn't work. So I think that's been a valuable thing for folks that are in Tony and I's space to share that with the OEMs.
Yeah, collaboration equals a mutual benefit, right? It's mutually beneficial for that committee to review those things so that we're all for the better. Whereas reciprocity is I do this, you get that, in a simplified definition.
Yeah, and I mean, you raise a very important point. I didn't even introduce myself. So I'm a VP of Auto Mobility at Escalent. We're an analytics and advisory service, basically a research company that works with everybody in the industry, whether it be tier 1, tier 2 OEMs. And one of the things that we continuously hear, you'll talk to an end user and they'll talk about, hey, I got this truck, we're trying to put a body on it and we can't, or we have to be super aware of what's going on, especially if it's an electric vehicle, because now all the tie down points are different. We can't drill into the floors. So all of the things that Tony and Caleb are doing on this committee are helping sort of rectify this so that when the end user gets the product, it's usable for them. When the dealer gets the product, it's not an issue. So that's some pretty awesome stuff. Jessie, I'm sorry, Greg, go ahead.
I was going to say, just to follow up on their comments. So one of the things we learned early on, so I mentioned that we have this money, we use it to fund products. And early on in the council's history, we would fund something and then nothing would happen with it because we didn't have that partnership. So now every time we fund a product, we make sure we have the buy-in from the engine manufacturer, the chassis manufacturer. If there's a special bed that needs to happen, we make sure we have the bodybuilders in there as well. And one of the things that we've done is we worked with Roush Cleantech to do a propane engine for Bluebird school buses. So we had to make sure that Bluebird was on board, had to make sure the Roush was on board. They're using a Ford engine for this. And we have the Class C market right now for school buses is mostly alternative fuels, mostly propane. So we make sure that we do have partnerships. We just can't fund things willy-nilly. We love to have input from people like yourselves and the people on this panel. What do you need? And then we go back to our board and say, hey, there's really a big interest for an F-150 or a school bus or something like that. So collaboration is all about what we do right now.
That's incredible.
Thank you.
Jessie, what are you thinking?
California is the 5th largest economy in the world, and we're the home of innovation, and all technological revolutions have happened and started here in California and grown throughout the United States and the rest of the world. Look at the solar industry, circa 2005, didn't exist. We put regulations in place that both enabled rooftop solar to grow and enabled utility scale solar to grow. And that kickstarted the market for solar. This year, the state of California, 5th largest economy in the world, we had over 100 days where our utility grid was completely powered by renewable resources. So this is where things happen. This is where stuff starts. And so we have some big carbon neutrality goals, and that includes moving to zero emission commercial trucking. And to enable that, we really see that collaboration and enabling folks in the industry to have the resources that they need to make that transition is really important. And that is through incentives and tax credits and working with the utilities through our Public Utilities Commission to ensure that their processes are streamlined and efficient and that they're getting the grid upgrades done that are necessary to get power to the sites where different trucking companies need that power. We're also seeing a lot of great collaboration, as some of the other panelists noted, amongst industry stakeholders themselves. And that is really influencing the outcomes of procurement and pricing for vehicles. We're seeing collaboration around building out charging depots. And we're seeing a lot of collaboration in the policy space as well, which I can elaborate on. And then finally, I think that reciprocity and kind of collaboration is also reflected in public-private partnerships, which California is really leading on, especially when we think about kickstarting the hydrogen economy, similar to how we did in 2005 for solar. And that is happening right now as well.
Fascinating. Something that's interesting, all of you are talking about different entities coming together sort of for the greater good to propel things forward. I want to know how much of this is proactive. It's one thing when regulations hit and we all have to put our brains together to figure out how to navigate the landscape and get things done. It's another when we say, you know what, we want to build a better product, or we want to come up with something new, whether it be, for sales or just to make our companies more efficient. How does anybody who's listening to this panel sort of germinate an idea or come together with other entities to make things happen when it's not forced upon them?
I'm happy to talk how we work. So
Sure.
because we are a funding organization, we get this money every year. We actively go out and look for products. So if we hear, we go to shows like the Work Truck Show and ACT Expo and things. And if we hear that someone is in desperate need of an engine for medium duty vehicles, then we go look for medium duty manufacturers. So people tend to like seeing us because we do have funding. So we have incentives, built-in incentives, and our whole mission is to provide efficient use of propane. So we want to always make our products more efficient, save the end consumer money by having more efficient products. So we're always looking for ways to help out. Right now, we're working with the EV charging industry, and we have propane generators on EV charging platforms for places that don't have electric. So it's a nice way for us to actually help out, get EV going. You look at places that are starting up EV programs and they don't have a charging station put in, we can actually help them temporarily set one up. So we do try to partner with other alternative fuels. Our CEO has written a book called The Path to Zero. And in The Path to Zero, he's talking about net neutrality by 2050. And in it, he talks about working with all the different alternative fuels, and that there's a place for all of us. He calls it the silver buckshot instead of the silver bullet. So that is our whole mission in life, is to partner with folks and to make sure that we're out and about and we're offering opportunities. And also, if people come to us, that we help them fund things. So that's what we do.
Very cool. Others, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think, or go ahead, Jessie.
No, go ahead, Caleb, please.
Well, I was just going to say on our end, we're always, obviously, just like most manufacturers, always trying to, continuously improve your product. But I think you'd have to live under a rock to not notice that a big factor in product development over the last, 3 to 4 years has been around, EV and electric vehicles. Obviously, any trade show you go to, that you're seeing more and more platforms. But a lot of, the collaboration doesn't just stop between the body companies, but also, with customers themselves. Every time we go to a trade show, you're always going to get a few folks that walk by and say, have you thought about this? Or have you tried this? And sometimes they're just not feasible. And once you explain that, they understand. But sometimes you get some really great ideas. And that's a big benefit of those industry shows, that you get a lot of great feedback, not just from customers or end users, but also from just walking around the show and talking with other folks that are developing maybe not products equal to ours, but maybe products that go into our vehicles. So yeah, there's a lot of collaboration at those shows, a lot of feedback, a lot of good discussions. So
Caleb, I don't want to put you on the spot, but has there ever been a situation where, I don't know, like someone shows up at a show, whether it be a dealer or a company, and they have an idea, and do you ever swap business cards and say, yeah, like hey man, like let's talk a little bit more about this. Maybe there's something we can do.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and sometimes it's something very simple that we just somehow have overlooked, and just a feature on a vehicle that where you can make a quick change or a quick improvement that just makes sense. Other times, you know, you'll have obviously vendors and suppliers at these shows that'll come up and they'll have new materials. You know, obviously right now with EV vehicles, lightweight materials is a big deal, and trying to extend range. So you'll always have manufacturing and supplier partners coming up and saying, have you tried this? Have you thought about this? So yeah, absolutely.
Oh, awesome.
I'll just add, you know, I really appreciated Greg mentioning ACT Expo, and if no one's ever been to Expo, it just keeps getting more and more exciting every year. But what you'll see at the next ACT Expo, for example, which will be in California, will be more hydrogen products. And the reason for that is the federal government actually has a hydrogen Earthshot challenge that aims to reduce the cost of renewable hydrogen by 80% within 1 decade. And the applications for hydrogen certainly go beyond commercial trucking and transit buses, school buses, to heavy industry, and eventually aviation and marine vessels and whatnot. But the federal government issued a solicitation a few years ago to create hydrogen hubs around the country. So areas that would really kickstart the hydrogen economy. And in California, rather than having a lot of different stakeholders each individually submit proposals of what they would do to create a hydrogen hub, the state of California, led by the office that I'm in, GO-Biz, partnered with all of these private sector stakeholders. And this includes the energy majors like Chevron, OEMs like Hyundai and Honda and others, plus all the infrastructure providers and fuel providers like Iwatani. So we have this huge network that's now a part of something called ARCHES, which is California's public-private partnership that went after funding from the federal government to create California as a hydrogen hub. And we were awarded $1.2 billion to do just that. And so now through the ARCHES network, again, this collaboration, to the theme of this panel, reciprocity, how do we all help each other? We are ramping up what the hydrogen hub will do in California. And that includes setting up manufacturing for hydrogen, setting up procurement pathways to aggregate the demand of thousands of commercial heavy-duty trucks, thousands of transit buses, and other applications, again, to really drive down that cost, because we're creating that demand intentionally and in an aggregated way.
Yeah, fascinating. You know, it sort of begs the question, because again, you're all sort of touching on it, that the collaboration is so important, again, not just to support the industry, but to drive things forward. Do you feel like there's any particular areas where it makes good sense for a business in the commercial vehicle space to say, you know, maybe to think a little bit on their own, to say, hey, maybe there's an opportunity for us here? Because what we're talking about now is collaboration on a pretty sizable scale, but what happens when we scale it down? Are there areas that make sense for maybe a small or medium-sized enterprise to get into?
I'm going to say yes. So one of the things, so I talked about school buses, propane for school buses. So The interesting thing about propane, when you get into the fueling, a lot of people don't talk about fueling options. They talk about more the product. But if you look at fueling options, propane is the least expensive fueling option, even compared to gasoline or diesel. And that's because we don't contaminate groundwater. So we don't have all the EPA monitoring, and you don't have to worry about any type of spills or accidents like that. So if you're looking at starting an alternative fuel project, getting into propane is very, very easy. And most of the propane marketers located throughout the United States will actually partner and actually give you, I hate to say a free station because we know nothing's free, but they will add the cost of the station to on a per gallon basis that'll still be less expensive than gasoline or diesel. So we're always looking for partnership opportunities like that. When we're talking about individual fueling, though, it's not us. We wouldn't get involved at the council. But propane marketers, where you actually buy propane, they would actually come out to your site, help you get going. And now that we have this option with propane generators for EV charging stations, they could even get you set up on an EV platform. So we got a bunch of things we're working on right now.
Hey, I'll take a free propane station.
There you go. Hey, you got to have a couple vehicles though. So like I said, not everything's free.
Okay, I thought it was for barbecuing, but still works. What's fascinating, again, because I talked to so many, fleet managers, transportation managers, et cetera. I remember talking to this one guy, and he was saying that his leadership has commissioned. So Jessie was just talking about ACT Expo. His leadership has said for his team, and they run a distribution service. So they've got 50, 60 trucks. Some of them are box trucks, some of them are Class 8. But he is mandated to go to these shows twice a year, whether it be Work Truck Week or ACT Expo, to find out new innovations and things that they can use and bring them back to the company so that they can continue to evolve. That to me was pretty fascinating. Like that's a pretty amazing initiative considering that they're not a monster sized company. Does anybody else have any examples of things like that where, I don't know, maybe you've encountered somebody or maybe you've done it on your own where it's a sort of you seeking out collaborations or partnerships or new and different things?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, Jessie. I think you hit something on the head there, Gregory. It's because the commercial industry, if we just focus on that, it's ever evolving, especially in what is propelling a vehicle. And to understand what a body company or other upfitters or anybody that's doing anything to a vehicle that's being propelled by something, you need education, you need to understand what's going on. And people like myself and Caleb and others that manufacture and upfit these bare chassis, we need to understand what's going on out there so that we can have collaborative conversations with the dealer body, end users, fleets, because everybody's looking for that information. Certain people are experts in their own space, but many of us need to be able to do that. I remember something pretty clear back in, I want to say it was 2014 when Ford launched the Transit. Frontal area became a topic on bodies and what size body you could put on certain chassis. And you need to collaborate. You need to be an expert. You need to be able to help people understand so that they know what can be done, the reasons behind it. It's not a problem. You just need to talk through it and understand it. So that education piece and just making sure that folks are getting out there to understand what is happening now, what's happening in the future, what may have gotten circled around. It's important.
Yeah, and I have to say, Tony, I did borrow a quote from you. I did a presentation this summit yesterday, and the quote was, "If there's no conversation, there's no collaboration." And I remember you saying that when we had talked earlier. And you're sort of echoing that now, right? Like there needs to be those conversations in industry to figure out what the opportunity spaces actually are.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah, Jessie, what were you going to add?
I was going to add, you had mentioned working with fleets, and then Tony made some really great points right now that align with your comments, and it just highlighted to me an opportunity for participants today to think about how they might work together to go after all the funding that's available from different state agencies and the federal government right now around zero-emission vehicles. And many medium and small businesses, whether it's a dealership or a fleet itself, don't have the bandwidth, staffing resources, experience to go after these complex grant funding opportunities, or once you get them, to actually manage them. And I would recommend, and what we're seeing is a lot of what would be competitors normally actually coming together and saying, let's go after this funding opportunity as one voice. And that could be a suite of dealers in a specific geographical area who go after that grant funding resource on behalf of the customer fleets that they serve. And I'll just give you, for example, you go after funding to hire a third-party consulting firm who will then do fleet electrification assessments for all the fleets that are served by that group of dealers, so that the fleets themselves know exactly how they're going to transition the vehicles that are in their fleets over what duration of time, and how they're going to work with the dealers that they're partnered with to procure those vehicles, maybe even in aggregate, to drive down cost. And that way it's, helping everybody involved. And, there are plenty of third-party consulting firms out there, G&A, TRC, there's a whole bunch of them who are really experts in that space. And so that's just one area that kind of came to mind when you're talking about fleets, and Tony was talking about the opportunities that he was seeing for, if you don't actually start that dialogue, you don't know that there's opportunities to partner. And there's a lot of money out there right now. And I think that is an area where, the industry can start to think through, how do we actually start talking to each other about going after some of these funding opportunities to ultimately help our customer base, who themselves can't individually on their own go after this funding opportunity. So that might be an area of collaborative opportunity for those on the line to think about.
Yeah, Jessie, I think we get a little brainwashed, like you're absolutely right. Every day I get these these news bulletins and newsletters, et cetera, about what's going on in the industry. And they talk about the amount of money that's being handed out, and it's billions, like it's hundreds of millions, if not billions. And I feel like as an industry, probably just as society, we've sort of overlooked the amount of money that's available. Kind of like now, if the lottery is not $1 billion, I'm not going to buy the $2 ticket, but there's so much money available. It sort of begs the question why people wouldn't chase that money down. So let me ask a different question to everybody, which is, again, like we keep talking about collaboration, but it's really hard to self-organize. And it's hard to organize across competitors. Like, Caleb and Tony, it makes sense for them to get together. They're at that level where as formal organizations, we can put our heads together and come up with solutions. But given that there's so many sort of dealers on this call or smaller organizations, the question is, how would you suggest they organize themselves where it's not onerous, but it's formal enough that they can actually all come together to do something that's beneficial?
I was going to mention, to follow up on Jesse's comments, so there's an organization called Clean Cities, and a lot of us have been part of the Clean Cities, and there are coalitions all over the United States. I don't remember the number now, but it's 80 something. And their whole mission is to bring people together, and then they actually will find money for you. So they'll write the grant, they'll, you become part of the coalition. and then they get partners. And because part of these grants, they are looking for more than just one organization getting the funding. So if you have a bunch of folks together, a bunch of fleets, different type of alternative fuel options, that's the best way to get this funding. So if you haven't heard of Clean Cities, it's a Department of Energy project, and they're all over the country. I think they just celebrated 30 years, so they've been around and they really know what they're doing. So the propane industry works closely with them, and we try to help them, and they certainly help us, and they help fleets.
Any other thoughts on how they might do this? You know, how might 3 dealers come together to say, hey, you know what, maybe we can get some money to go do something interesting?
It starts a little bit with the demand. I think education is key in a lot of this stuff with EV vehicles, with the funding access. It's just an awareness. So there's some dealers that are very aware of those opportunities, probably based off their geographic location, whether they're in cities that are promoting it. And then there's obviously dealers that may be more rural, maybe not have as much exposure to it. But we find that even working with the chassis OEMs like Ford, like GM, where they have pockets in the country that know the programs, know what's available, and kind of look for those opportunities. And then there's other dealers that just don't get the exposure to it. So I think a little bit of it is probably just an education and awareness, which I think as a body company, we probably have an opportunity to help with that, but obviously the chassis OEMs play a big part in that and educating their dealerships on how to push these types of products and what the opportunities are with them. So,
and I'd say, when it comes to the EV aspect for a commercial dealer right now, it's a large investment, right? They have to make sure that they have the infrastructure at their dealership to be able to navigate it. There was one of the topics yesterday in the summit. It talks about inventory levels, and we're at 200+% from where we were pre-pandemic. Floor plan costs are high. So if you have a dealer that is just getting into this or has just gotten into the EV aspect and has some chassis on the ground, has some vehicles on the ground, because it may not be specifically commercial, but it might be fleet. It's not a set it and forget it. It's going to take time. It's like a new commercial salesperson coming into a dealership, next alongside of a veteran at a dealership. That veteran that has put in all that time has business coming in day over day, week over week, month over month, and the new individual has to go out there. It's not easy. So there are some pain points in and having collaboration among dealers. There's truck clubs and different things, 20 groups that dealers can talk about this, where they're not. It's not in a competitive mindset. It's more in that collaborative and like, hey, this is what's working, this is what's not working. Certain vehicles aren't a one size fits all. You have to understand where that vehicle fits in a particular space. So that's just a couple vantage points from my end.
I would add that in addition to just the collaboration around going after money to do fleet electrification assessments, or to bring down the cost of vehicles if you were a fleet and you were ready to procure a new type of technology, is the workforce development piece. And to Tony's point, we are reinventing the way we move people and goods in real time. And so this does take a lot of time and energy, and it's not all going to happen at once. And we're going to learn as we go. And, because California is so much further ahead in this market than other areas of the country, we are seeing that workforce development piece as a key critical priority in upskilling mechanics who work at these dealerships, mechanics within the fleets, ensuring that there's a whole new generation of workers, skilled workers, who can perform maintenance on zero emission trucks and buses into the future. And so that's really like, how do you generate the interest from high schools to community college training programs to actually get students to want to go do this kind of work? This is no longer changing oil and working on transmissions. Zero emission trucks and buses are basically computers on wheels. And if we see so much interest from high school students wanting to go into tech, we kind of need to rebrand what it means to be an automotive technician, because essentially they are now going into tech to work on these computers on wheels. So these are things that we're grappling with in California so that we can, one, upskill the existing workforce so that they can work on these technologies, and then also generate that interest from new workers that need to come into the field, because ultimately, goods movement is the engine of our economy, and we need to keep those trucks operating and on the road. And that means that we also need the skilled workforce to be able to do that. And so we're starting to see the state invest more money into not just incentives for the trucks, but money into how do we create those pathways for workforce development. So that's another area where, dealerships and other stakeholders that might be on the line today could start thinking about, how do we work together, even with our community colleges and some of the high schools, to go after workforce development money in this space, and within a region, try to create some new programming, curriculum, etc., to help you prepare for that transition.
Jessie, I'm glad you used the word pathway, because it seems to me, if I put myself in a dealer's shoes, or I put myself in any company's shoes, like anybody who's listening, the first question that comes to my mind is, okay, this all sounds great. Like, these guys are clearly amazing, highly intelligent, good-looking people. That's what they're saying right now. It's a joke. But they're also saying, how do I get into this? Like, what's the door? What's the pathway for me to do this? It all sounds very cool, but I'm sitting here and I don't know who to call. I don't know what to ask. I don't know what's available. And again, like Jessie, your examples are great, because clearly, when it comes to a state body, there's all sorts of mechanisms to go and apply for things. But it's not always so easy when you're sitting there, in your office going, hey, like, what do we do next? So what, as a group, do we have any suggestions or any thoughts on what could sort of be a catalyst or an opening for them to start doing these sorts of things?
Well, I think, on our space, just speaking on our space specifically, it's all about, I think Tony mentioned it briefly too, but it's all about identifying the application, because again, there's not a one size fits all for these different applications. So in a lot of cases, it's working with, the dealers to educate the end users on which types of products, what types of propulsion platforms work for which, for different applications. Because, we've had some folks that tried EV and had a bad experience because they weren't using it in an application that probably made the most sense, right? And but again, that was probably a failure somewhere before they got that vehicle to understand properly how they were using the vehicle and to identify if that was the right platform or not. So in our space, it's a lot of that. We try to help dealers. Some dealers are very good at that. Some dealers who maybe don't do as much work in the commercial space need some help and ask for help, which is great. And in our mind, that's the key, is putting people in the right vehicle, because in the right platform, because otherwise nobody's winning. The customer's not winning, the dealer then in return doesn't.
So we found the exact same thing, just to echo that comment. So, I've been around for 30 years. I think somebody mentioned that they've been doing this for a while too. And everybody wanted to go green and, for the environment. And now the green for us in Propane is that school bus fleets are saving a ton of money. And once they started saving money, that's when people say, hey, this makes a lot of sense for us. So they're buying more school books, they're building classrooms, they're not worrying about the cost of the propane because it's less expensive than gasoline or diesel. And the vehicles themselves, that's one of the cool things too, is that the vehicles, because they're very similar, you know, it's still an internal combustion engine, it's just running propane. They're inexpensive when you compare them to diesel or electric or other options. So I think you have to find the correct fit for, you know, your fleet. The Clean Cities coalitions, I think if you had to find someplace, you know, where to start, there's a green summit that's at the Work Truck Show. A lot of folks will be there talking about products. There's ACT Expo, which is all alternative fuels. And then you have these Clean City coalitions that's what they do day in and day out. So they're not promoting one fuel, they're promoting all of them. And if you have certain, you know, if your fleet is school buses, they may recommend propane. But if your fleet is over the road trucks, they're not going to recommend propane. They might go natural gas, they might go hydrogen. So there's a lot of options there. And I think if I had to start, if I was a fleet manager, that's probably the first place I would go, because there are other fleet managers in those groups that have done things, and you can get a lot of interesting feedback from the peers, good and bad, you know, like what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, there's actually a specific question for you, Greg. It says, are you seeing continued interest and growth in propane as an option? And probably the addendum to that is considering all the focus on other alternative fuels.
Yes, and we are, but our sweet spot is mid-duty vehicles and school buses. So we're not doing anything bigger than that right now. I'm not sure. We always have skunk work things going on with engine manufacturers, but right now that mid-duty and the school buses has been very sweet spot for us, and it's because they're saving money. So hotel shuttles, airport shuttles, we have a lot of vehicles running on propane. But again, if you go back, you know, they want to be good stewards and they want to save the environment, but they're really saving money. And that's really what's driving our side of the equation. You know, they're saving money and they're doing saving the environment. So we are seeing a lot of growth. Yes.
Yeah. You know, we've all sort of talked in this conversation about the shows. In one way or another, we keep talking about these shows. Just throwing this out there, do you feel like these shows are probably the best way to you know, start working with others? It just seems to, from my perspective, you know, you basically have everybody in one spot. They're all sort of thinking the same way. It seems like a great opportunity for anybody who shows up there to start having these conversations, as Tony mentioned, you know, to start working together, or even Caleb was talking about even just proposing things. What's your point of view on that?
I think that is a perfect place. You know, ACT Expo is really the ideal place to like get those conversations going. I'll give you an example, kind of circa 2018. I used to be with the city and county of San Francisco, and myself with other major West Coast cities at ACT Expo. We got together, we had a closed door session with OEMs, and we said, hey, if we all aggregate our municipal fleet portfolios and bring to you thousands of light duty vehicles that need to be electrified, would you reduce pricing for delivery of those vehicles? And so we issued a solicitation, did just that, eventually added other fleets from other states, and it grew into this national procurement. It was called the Mayor's EV Purchasing Collaborative. And now today, municipal fleets from all over the country can buy from this purchasing collaborative. And so that all started from this kind of conversation at that type of event that you are referring to. And so I would actually suggest reaching out to TRC, who organizes ACT Expo, and propose that kind of a meeting where there's outreach that's done to the dealers, if you think that's the target audience that needs to come together. And there's a structured, facilitated discussion among the participants in that session of how do you work together to meet the needs of your customers, or to go after funding. What are the highest priority areas you should focus on in going after funding or helping your customers? And, I think that the organizers, TRC and their team could help you think through, what that kind of could look like.
Mhm. Where do you think, that's perfect, Jessie. For each of you, where do you feel like the biggest areas of collaboration to propel innovation exist for you, like specifically for what you do on a day-to-day basis?
I think you said where does some of that?
Mm-hmm.
I think, and again, we're hammering it here on it late, but I think the industry shows. I think we all get in the day-to-day groove of just getting the work done. That to your point earlier, you asked if something was reactive or proactive. I think trade shows kind of give you. I think trade shows are very beneficial for a lot of different folks, but I think it gives you an opportunity to step away from the day-to-day grind. See what's going on in the industry, get that industry feedback, talk to your peers, talk to to end users. I think it's a great opportunity to. In fact, we always come back from those shows with some ideas on driving forward, right? Changing, making improvements, offering new options or products. So I still we've been talking about it here late, but I think that the industry shows are very valuable to not just to us, but the folks on the call, dealers, end users, to get a lot of information and to collaborate.
They come back reinvigorated, and there's a lot to learn, and when it comes to these different alternative forms of propulsion and fueling per se, there's a lot of people out there that want to learn and understand more, but are afraid to look dumb. Like they want to learn, but it's like you have to go out there. You have to understand, learn it, and specifically for a dealer, you're focusing on the propulsion choices that your OE is providing. So try to become an expert in that, and then look at alternatives that might not be on your platform to then be able to have talking points. And when it comes to reciprocity, it's like, well, my OE platform has this, but there's another alternative, and that's a little scary because you're potentially pointing somebody in a different direction, but you're not setting that person up to fail, and they're certainly going to remember that.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tony. I feel like part of the thing that stifles collaboration and or innovation is just that fear of going into the unknown. Even though collaboration is supposed to actually, mitigate risk and suppress those fears, people get so used to doing what they're doing on a day-to-day basis that they're almost, they feel like they're going to compromise themselves or their businesses by stepping outside of that scope. Do you agree? Do you guys agree with that? Like maybe part of this is just having, I don't want to say courage, but certainly, taking a little bit of a risk to go and start having conversations or poking around to see what's possible without a fear of it sort of damaging what you do on a day-to-day basis.
What Caleb said, it's like you got the day-to-day, but it's you're either going to work in the business or on the business, or work on you or in you, right? Like you gotta be able to step aside. There's always going to be something to fix, something to do. So if you just keep focusing on that, you're never going to get to the other side. Hot kettle black here, but so.
Yeah.
So if the shows, we talked about the shows. So because we at the council, we do education, research, funding, we do training programs. At these shows, people will come up to us and say, hey, we talked to this person who said this about propane. Is that true? Is that true? That false? So we're kind of like a sounding board. So it shows we're extremely busy. And basically, we provide a lot of materials to say, this is what you can expect. These are the manufacturers that have product. If you have any questions, technical questions, we have people on our staff that have background in setting up stations that know all the codes. Obviously, we're involved in codes. So it shows we're busy, but not because we sell anything, because we provide advice and basically a sounding board. Like, is this really going to happen? Are propane fueling stations the least expensive option, like this fella told us? So we're very busy at shows, and we will go to booths, the OEMs and the body manufacturers, to say, hey, what do you need from us? Is there a possibility that you can work a propane engine into your lineup? Which 20 years ago, we thought, oh, it's super easy to make an engine, right? I mean, it takes, we'll give them $100,000, they'll do an engine, and, we're finding out, no, we'll give them a couple million, and they're still putting in 10 million to do it. So it's a lot of collaboration that needs to happen in order to see a platform happen. And the body folks that are on here, I can see them shaking their heads like, yeah, it's not as easy as people think to start swapping engines in and out of these bodies. So these shows are very, very valuable for us, because we talk to the OEMs, we talk to the body manufacturers, and then a lot of fleets come and talk to us as well.
Yeah.
I was just going to add that, I love Greg's suggestion about talking to the Clean Cities Coalition, and oftentimes members of the regional clean cities coalitions around the country also have air districts or state air board representation. And that is your conduit to the money, because they have their thumb on, the pulse of what's coming down from the federal government, how that money actually flows through state agencies and then down to regional air districts. And those agency staffers should be able to help connect you to those resources. To your Greg S.
Which one?
Not Greg V. To your question originally about what really helps innovation move forward, I know you said that in the beginning of this whole session, everybody's ears perked up when I talked about getting power to a site. And I would say, as you, as a dealer and or an OEM working with your customers who are fleets, learn what trucks, vehicles are right, which zero emission trucks, vehicles, medium, heavy duty, class 3 through 8 works for the different operational components of that fleet, to then go to your local utility early to say, hey, we're going to need to transition this many vehicles for this fleet. And we know that this fleet wants to transition this many vehicles. So within a particular region with a utility, the utilities need to know that so that they can say, hey, on these circuits, we actually have the available capacity to be able to deliver that amount of electricity to those sites, or we're going to need to conduct grid upgrades. And that's going to take us, like in California right now, 3 to 5 years. And so then that enables a fleet to look at solutions like Greg Z's propane charging solutions for school districts. Or in California, we're starting to see major charging station developers incorporate a technology called linear generators that enable on-site generation of electricity paired with battery energy storage, and that power goes to the fast chargers. If you're all not familiar with Prologis has the largest heavy-duty truck charging hub in the country. It enables 96 zero-emission Class 8 trucks to be charged at their Denker site in Southern California using linear generators. And that right now is powered by natural gas, because the electric utility couldn't get the power that they needed for that project for 3 years plus out. But the natural gas utility could get that power there to them. And so right now, those linear generators are powered with natural gas, but they're fuel flexible. And so in the future, as we drive down the cost for green hydrogen, as renewable natural gas is readily available, those linear generators can use those low carbon or zero carbon energy sources to produce that same on-site power and help with resiliency on the grid. So my point is connecting not just with your customers, but also having the customers connect with the utility. So the utility understands what kind of power you need so they can plan for that in advance of when you actually need the power. And that's going to enable the innovation, because otherwise the trucks can't get on the road if they don't have the power they need to move.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. All right. Well, we've got 17 seconds left. So why don't we just end on that note? I mean, it's a pretty positive note. I want to thank each of you for taking the time to participate in this panel. Clearly, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of initiative each of you has demonstrated, in the sorts of things that you're doing. And hopefully, it's inspired people in the audience to take that step and go do things on their own. So thank you so much for taking the time. And if you're watching, stay tuned for the next speaker. They'll hopefully be just as great as these guys were.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.